Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Bagea. I'm ASI's social media producer. And today I have Chris Ruvo, who is here to answer any questions you have about supply chain and promo, scams, and 2023 outlook, that kind of thing. Chris, thank you for joining us today. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you so much for hosting. I appreciate it, Eliza.
it. Yeah, so I guess we'll just give it a couple seconds to see if anybody comes in.
Mhm.
And if not, I have a few questions for you. And everybody can refer back to this video, or if they want, they could probably reach out to you, right, Chris, if they have any
Yeah,
questions.
that'd be absolutely fine. I'm super reachable. CRUVO at asicentral.com is my email. My Twitter handle is at Chris R underscore ASI. Um, LinkedIn, you could go there. There's not too many other Christopher Ruvo, so you could find me on LinkedIn as well. Just put my name in, and I'll try to respond to any questions people might have through those channels.
Perfect. Thank you. And Chris, could you just give us a little bit of like an intro about what you do for ASI and everything for those who don't know you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would assume most don't, so I'm happy to I'm happy to share. So I'm the digital news director slash editor for ASI. I'm kind of in charge of directing our news content. News content primarily consists of covering topics that that are occurring in the now that are impacting our industry,
Mhm.
both on an industry specific level and then from a broader economic and social standpoint. So there's we'll cover everything as we're going to talk about today, from supplies and scams that impact the industry to supply chain issues to developments in the business world and in the legislative world, all that impact the promotional products industry in some way or another.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
So, I'll just start with a few questions that I have here for you
absolutely.
until someone else pops on in.
Mhm.
So, what's the state of the promo industry's supply chain currently, and what's the outlook for the new year?
Yeah, so it's much improved, and that's a really encouraging word.
Mhm.
In 2021, I think we all know there was massive supply chain disruption. Um, Factories over in China were behind on production. There was delays there. There was port congestion, both overseas and at American ports. You don't need to rehash it all. What it all amounted to is that it was r- leading to inventory shortages here in North America of crucial promotional products. A lot of that has changed for reasons that both our industry influenced and just because the dynamics of the supply chains have changed. One of the biggest things is that there's just less importing going on. In North American based companies, retailers in particular, are just importing less product now than they were, say, a year ago, because a lot of them are experiencing inventory gluts. So that's kind of freed up space to transport products and made it more efficient to get the products over from where they're primarily made in China. Our industry also, though, deserves some credit too, because suppliers in our industry, in particular, because they became much more strategic, I should say, or maybe more strategic is the wrong word, but more proactive in how they were sourcing products. They were ordering more products farther in advance to bolster inventory levels, so they wouldn't be derailed by some of the longer lead times they were facing.
Right.
So what it's led to is, at least on the back end of the supply chain, inventory levels are now much stronger across the industry than they were a year ago. There's still other supply chain factors that are challenging. Like it's still a challenge to get enough labor if you're a supplier domestically, which is led to, in cases anyway, orders going out the door slower than they maybe would have, and with less accuracy than they would have prior to the pandemic. But even that has started to improve significantly too. We've been hearing from suppliers lately that they have been able to staff up more than they were, say, a year ago. That they are getting closer, and in some cases even exceeding um, pre-COVID production times and things of that nature. So the supply chain, the big takeaway is that supply chain right now is in a much better place than where it was in 2021 and 2022. It looks to be like that correction to the better will continue in 2023. There are a couple headwinds to watch though, because China just ended its zero COVID policy, zero tolerance for COVID policy.
Mhm.
So while that's in the long term a good thing, you shouldn't have those constant restrictions on people, which hurt business and factory production. It is likely to lead to significant outbreaks of COVID in China, which could obviously derail productivity at factories if workers are constantly calling out sick. So that's something to watch, but it's not yet at like a critical mass point or a major issue. So heading into 2023, we're looking better on supply chain. Long-winded answer, but there you go. You got everything you need in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, that's a great
Yeah,
wrap up and summary of what's been going on. Thank you.
sure.
So, could you give us a little bit about what's going on with the scams aimed toward promo firms right now?
Yeah, sure. So like scams aimed at our industry are not necessarily anything new. I think what's new though is the level of sophistication of the scams, and what seems to be that these scams are more organized and maybe being orchestrated by what some industry executives believe to be a racket, like an actual criminal racket or multiple rackets that have identified
Mhm,
our industry as a weak spot and one prime prime to be taken advantage of through scams. That's maybe the big differentiator as to what we've seen in the past. It seems more frequent, more organized, and more sophisticated.
mhm,
And I could probably write an article 2 or 3 times a week based on new reports I get from distributors who email me in confidentiality, so I wouldn't share their names or anything, but they're saying, "Hey, you know that article about such and such scam? I was approached in the same way." And, in some sad
mhm,
cases, they actually were out money, sometimes over $100,000 on certain orders. That's how much money they lost because of being victimized through these scams. In other cases, they've identified the issue.
mhm.
So I guess I should probably tell you what the scams are, right? Yeah,
Yeah, what's the most
might have been
common
better.
one?
It might have been a better place to start. Anyway, so basically these scams are coming through an email approach.
Okay.
You'll have a criminal basically pose as a buyer for a real. It could be a company, a university, a utility. It could be any potential end client that a promotion and products distributor would sell to. Sometimes, in cases, it's even been um, clients or companies that a distributor has even worked with in the past. So it really has this air of
Wow.
validity. And
Mhm,
they'll send you this email and they'll say that they're interested in buying X amount of products. Often they've requested the number has been 10,000. That hasn't always been the case, but they'll say, "Hey, I want 10,000 speakers or 10,000 tumblers or 10,000 mugs," and
mhm.
they do give a veneer of appearing legit. Like they'll have like an email address that very closely
Right.
spoofs the real the legitimate email address.
Like
They'll have
off
the
the letter.
person, yeah, like an offer letter or offer or like, they'll have the person's exact address, but instead of like, at so and so company, it's like a Gmail address or something
Right.
like,
Mhm.
little tells like that. But if you're going quickly, you might not catch it. And
Yeah.
then they'll have, it'll be, as I say, a legitimate company and it'll be somebody who actually works there. And they'll actually request, and in cases, a credit application, which gives even more of an air of validity to it. They'll send over like a vector art sheet with logos and like, color match and stuff of that nature. So it seems like wow, this is a real, company
Yeah.
that's looking interested in doing business. Um, some distributors who may be more experienced, they've spotted these things pretty quickly. Others who are just maybe you're going fast, you're trying to get through a bunch of orders, as you're
Mhm.
busy. This seems like a great opportunity. You want to believe it's real, and you start going through without, necessarily doing due diligence, and it's led to distributors being scammed, where what they'll do is they'll fulfill the order, expecting to get payment. Often the terms presented are net 30 terms, and then they'll never get that payment, and they still owe the supplier money, of course, but
Right.
now they're on the hook for the however much they paid for the order, or the supplier's charge for the order.
Yeah, it's insane how scams are just a normal thing. I even as like a consumer and stuff like that, every
Mhm,
day I'm seeing on Facebook people saying like, "Watch out, there's this new scam where
mhm,
someone's calling you and
mhm,
it's the name of like someone in your phone and you
mhm.
pick it up and it's this whole scam. It's insane how creative they're getting, and the fact that they're targeting the promo industry now as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I totally agree, and there's other types too. That's the main one that we've been reporting on. There's certainly all kinds of other ones too, where they could be using, they could be trying to backdoor into various accounts that you might have. Obviously, I think we've seen so many high profile ransomware attacks, right?
mhm,
Where an employee, it's not so much a scam, but it's a trick, right?
mhm,
So it's where you click on the wrong thing and suddenly it launches something that cripples the company's whole
yeah,
system. I mean, that happened to Hanes Brands this year,
mhm,
huge name in our industry and every industry really. And
yeah,
I think they lost sales to the tune of about $100 million
oh
because
my
of the ransomware attack that they suffered. And we had another supplier this year, MV Sport. They're okay now, but they had suffered because of a ransomware malware attack. So these things are out there. The scams we've been
mhm.
focusing on of late have focused on that approach that I mentioned before, where they're trying to get you to give them product and then they're never paying for it. Um, but there's all kinds of stuff out there, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so then how do promo firms, like, protect themselves from these types of scams, since it seems like it's a regular everyday thing now at this point? What can they do to protect themselves?
Yeah, as far as like the ransomware malware
Mhm,
ones, those that starts with employee education, yeah, teaching employees to identify, suspicious emails, approaches, not to click on, suspicious files, not to click on links sent at
mhm,
random, or PDFs, or things that might appear to be a PDF, at random. Those are basic steps you could take. On the IT side of things, obviously, you want to implement two-factor authentication for your systems and the people who are using those systems. I think that's a huge catch-all that a lot of people, a lot of smart companies are doing. Be up to date on all your updates and your firewalls, et cetera. But ultimately, if an employee clicks on something that's infected, it's going to get past your defenses, because
right,
it's that employee has become the access point for the infection. So I would really just emphasize for that aspect of things, employee education on cyber attacks. Now, as far as the scam approaches go,
mhm,
where we're emailing you and we're saying, hey, I want to order, I'm Joe such and such from, Penn State University, and I want to order, 100,000 mugs. Well, there's certain tells, of course, I think that you could look for. Number one, we kind of already mentioned, is the email address,
right,
legitimate. If it's a public, like a Gmail or a Yahoo, or whatever it might
mhm,
be, it's that should be a telltale sign. So one of the things you could do very, very simply is if you get an email from especially somebody you haven't worked with previously,
mhm,
you say, okay, they're saying that they're, such and such person and that they work at this company. I'm not going to respond to this email. I'm gonna go to the actual legitimate company website, and I'm gonna try to find their contact information, and I'm
mhm,
gonna send a whole separate email, or even better yet, call, to say, hey, is this you? Are you legitimately interested in this? Because if they are and they sent that email and it's a legit, they're going to take your call, or they're going to
mhm,
respond to your email in
exactly,
the appropriate way, right?
mhm,
Um, what you don't want to do, of course, is email that email address that you got and
yeah,
say,
mhm.
are you real? Yes, I am. Like, so
Yeah, that would definitely make you lose a sale in that
yeah. So that's not a
yeah,
great way to go. Let me see if I can get you some others. So,
mhm,
things like asking for credit references, and then checking the credit references, but going off of like they may give a credit reference, right? And they
mhm,
say but like, do the research on the credit reference as well. Is this a
right,
real person? In a legitimate position, and are you contacting the person that's purported to who that person's actually
mhm,
purported to be? Make sure that's not another fake,
yeah,
basically. So that's another big thing that you could do. So you mentioned email address, you mentioned another thing too is distributors used to think, well, if the request is for blank products, hey, that's shady, because they're,
mhm,
you know. But
right,
nowadays they are requesting branded products as well. So be
okay,
aware that it's not just requests for blank products anymore. You have to also be aware that they will request, branded products as well.
mhm,
So just kind of another thing that maybe in the past might have not been a tell, but is. Another thing too is they will, so let's say you've kind of gotten into the sale, right? And
Mhm.
or the sales process. And they send over a purchase order. That's another time where you could catch a potential scam. So say to yourself, oh, am I a little suspicious about this? Let me call. Let me not go to the contact I've been dealing with, but let me call like purchasing of this actual, company. Go to that person or that department there and say, hey, I've been in contact with so and so. They're saying that they're placing this order. Is this a purchase order that your company would actually put out? Is this a legitimate,
Mhm.
or can I just see what your purchase orders look like? So double check that purchase order with the actual company to see, A, is this something that they have in their pipeline, and B, does the physical purchase order you got line up with what that company's purchase order actually look like? Because a lot
Yeah.
of times there'll be discrepancies, even though the crooks are trying to make it look like it's
Right.
real.
Yeah, typically, if you just kind of spend some extra minutes and looking into something and really examining it, you can
Mhm.
find all those little discrepancies right there,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
all the faults and that kind of thing. What I feel is, I think at least for me, I had
Yeah.
no clue that like the Gmail would be
Hmm.
like a tell sign. Like you should be looking for,
Yeah.
we have at ASI or, at like whatever company at Hanes maybe .com, that kind of thing. I didn't
Hmm.
know that the Gmail or maybe a Yahoo could be something like that. Cause when you think of scams as like, personal, like a consumer and everything, if you're getting a scam, an Amazon scam, like, oh, your account has been locked out, you see something that looks really fishy. Like
Hmm.
the email name is just so
Hmm.
weird. It's not even from like at Gmail, it's something fake and that kind of thing. But it's interesting to hear that it could be even from an at Gmail or at
Yeah,
Hand.
totally. And the reason it for that is, if I'm actually working for, Penn State University, I'll use that example again, and I'm a buyer there. Why would I email you from a personal Gmail address? Or I'm
Exactly.
going to
Yeah.
email you from my professional account. I'm reaching out in a professional capacity, so I should be emailing you from a professional capacity
Yeah. No, that's
account,
true.
not you know
Yeah.
not my personal address. So that's a big tell there for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate you, coming out today and
Mhm.
doing this Q&A for us. And I know our members do appreciate it as well, especially since, scams are something that is really affecting our industry. And I think all the tips you've given us to identify and what to do if you have a scam email in your inbox were great. So I really appreciate everything today. And like you mentioned earlier, anybody could tweet you or email you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cruvo so CRUVO at ASIcentral.com, or at Chris R_ASI. Happy to answer any questions about that. And I would say if there's any good takeaways, it's that it's the supply chain is looking up a little bit. Even though there always seems to be some headwinds. We're in a better place than we were. So take some heart on that.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.